Hey guys, welcome back to My Ambition.
Hi everyone, it's Alex and
Tiffany.
oh, that was low key, Tiffany. Very calm today. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we've got a fabulous guest for you. We've got Deena Priest with us. So Deena is a career and business coach with 20 years of experience across law, management, consulting, sales and leadership development. She specialises in helping corporate leaders, especially working parents, create purposeful careers that integrate passion and profit. I think profit is really key there. Her career has given her insight into why some individuals excel while others struggle in the corporate world. And she's made it her mission to guide clients towards meaningful success. She enjoys coaching working parents, both men and women, and on how to balance their professional growth with their personal fulfillment. Her unique skill set blends coaching, consulting, sales, expertise, and neuro-linguistic programming. That's pretty hard to say, so we're going to call it NLP. To help leaders develop the mindset and strategies needed to thrive in their careers and lives. And most importantly, she's also a mother of two. Hi, Deena. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction.
Well, you're
very welcome.
Of your achievements there.
I was actually holding my breath because it sounded like such a long introduction. But no, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I think a great place to start would be, I did see, because I know that the intersection of your work and your teaching is purpose, passion, and pay. But I love to start with the challenges that you've overcome. And I saw somewhere in one of your posts that you've experienced restructures, job loss, toxic work cultures, and you've changed your careers a lot of times. So I'd love to know how all that has kind of added to the woman that you are today, and it actually inspired you to be.
Yeah. So I predominantly had a career like in big corporate businesses. So I started my career first in law, and then, as Alex was mentioning, I moved into management consulting and sales and leadership development. And after I had my kids, so my kids are older now, they're 7 and 9, but after I had my kids, I kind of took a bit of a step back and thought, what am I really doing and what do I really want kind of from my career? Because children bring a lot of meaning, into our lives. And I think they give us a lot of perspective about what's important, what's not important. I was a bit of a princess probably before I had kids. I think I'm a much nicer person now than I was then. And so just kind of reflecting back on my career, I thought, I'm really hustling here, working really long hours. Is it actually creating the impact that I want? And is it bringing me that kind of meaning and the fulfillment, that I'm really looking for in this chapter of my life? And that's really how I became a coach. It was just that realization that the work that I was doing, it was earning me a lot of money and I was progressing and I had the title and all that sort of thing, but it just wasn't giving me that sort of life satisfaction. So that's really why I kind of pivoted into becoming a coach, because the aspect of my career that I've always really enjoyed is that people development side. So, when I talk about like toxic cultures and things like that, I think you tolerate it more when you don't have kids and you kind of can, spend your time working your way up the ladder and figuring out what's my next career move and all this, the hustle doesn't bother you as much. But I think for a lot of people, once they have children, they don't want to do that anymore.
I like that. So the idea of this clarity that comes with motherhood, because I think Yasmin said the same. Amber said the same yesterday. So I think, and I hope through our conversations also with My Ambition, we're sharing the message that we understand that motherhood can be a hard transition. It can be a difficult time, but at the same time, perhaps there is a wisdom that we can gain from that transition. The clarity we get from like, okay, we've got a child now, time is of the essence. I have someone else who is watching me, maybe who is looking at me, and I need to change the narrative a bit. So I'm interested to know how that inspired, because I think you were saying that your children were watching you and then you had a moment where you just thought this is too much and they don't like how you're working.
Yeah, I mean, so many times I was just on my laptop in front of them and they would be like, come and play with me, come and make this puzzle with me, asking me loads of questions. And I just found I just found myself getting really irritated because I was so focused on my work, and then I immediately felt really guilty, and I thought, this is just wrong, because these guys are only going to be small, you know, for a short period of time, and then they're going to grow up and go to university and leave. So I should really be savoring this moment rather than focusing on kind of the hustle side of my career and, you know, being this sort of absentee kind of mum. And so I guess that was the catalyst. And then what I feel like lots of working mums want is to be a really, really good role model for their children, right? We want them to look at us and think, you know, she really enjoyed her career, she was always here for us, you know, and really kind of role model fulfilling work. And we want to be proud of ourselves, right, as well. Like, we don't want to look back on our lives and be like, yeah, I was absent, or I was working towards something that I didn't really care about, even though it was earning me like loads and loads of money.
And so how does that work? Because that, you know, I completely understand the pivot away from the long hours, the hustle. Does being your own boss bring with it some of its own hustle? How is it? How does it work to sort of branch out and do that setup? Because I imagine lots of people listening to this will think, I would, you know, if the corporate side of things isn't working for them, I would quite like to transition towards doing something for myself, but they're frightened of taking the leap. They're frightened of, like you say, taking less money. How do they make it profitable? How do they do it so they're not working all hours?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is that I don't necessarily think that everyone should make that leap, right? So there are ways to create a more purposeful career. So what we're trying to do, right, is create purposeful careers, and purposeful means different things to different people. So sometimes the reason why we are working these crazy hours and we're not, you know, present for our children and all that kind of thing is very much down to our own behaviors, right? We're not putting the right boundaries in place. We're people pleasers, you know, we've got this underconfident overachiever kind of, you know, personality going on. So the first thing I kind of always do with my clients is I tell them to tell me what success looks like for them, right? And get a really, really clear definition of success according to them, not what society tells them or their boss tells them, or I don't know, their friend or their mum tells them. And then from there, and so for them, if success is achievement and moving up the ladder, you know, that sort of thing, there is no reason for them to step away from that and jump, you know, into a business ownership. So that's kind of the first place that I start. So what does a purposeful career really even mean to you? So getting really, really clear on that North Star. And then once we kind of know, okay, what is their career North Star? What is it that they want, you know, long term? What are they working towards? Then we can start to think, like, what are all of the different steps or changes that you can make to get yourself there? And so one of them might be like a business, so starting a business, or perhaps creating a portfolio career, changing careers. I mean, there are lots of different options. But to your question, Alex, like, how do people kind of make that jump into business ownership, you know, bearing in mind that, you know, potentially the first couple of years you might not be earning, you know, very much money? I think there's a couple of things in there. So the first one is start building something while you're in a job. Like, that's always my advice. Don't throw the towel in out of frustration and be like, I hate my boss, you know, I'm getting out of here tomorrow. And then trying to kind of backpedal and think, oh God, you know, how am I now going to earn money? Mm-hmm. So be strategic and intentional about it. Like, think, what is a problem that I can solve that is in high demand, that people are willing to pay for, that I'm also really passionate about, that I potentially got skills and a network, you know, within, and then start to create something while you're in your job. That's what I did, actually. Then when you feel like it's got a bit of teeth and it's starting to kind of take off, that's your time to then transition out of there. But I would say that's the first thing. And, you know, have a good sort of bank of savings as well, because, yeah, the first couple of years can be a bit hit and miss.
I like, I like what you said there about starting on the side, because I think reality is people have bills to pay. Sometimes they might read an article that fires them up, and they're like, "Oh," but I don't know. If you have mouths to feed and you have responsibilities, and you've got to find a balance. And I think sometimes I'm all for entrepreneurship, but at the same time, I think there's a time and place. And sometimes people get frustrated by their job, and maybe they don't have a side thing. That's why they leave their job, and then they get this, kind of disgruntled with the system that entrepreneurship doesn't work. But that's because they haven't. So what about if people say then that, how do I then discover my passion? Like, how, if I don't have a passion, I don't know what I like, I'm a mom, I'm busy. Would you have any advice on how they can start to, get clarity on that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when you're a mom, it can be very hard to remember the person you were, right, before you had kids. Everywhere you go, you're, oh, this is so-and-so's mom. Like, you lose your identity a little bit. And also you're so tired, right? You're so tired, and you just can't think straight. Lots of coffee needed. But I think to really kind of take yourself back to when you were a kid, like, what were the things that you could just find yourself getting completely absorbed in, right? You'd spend hours and hours and hours just doing that one thing, or a couple of different sorts of things. So I think childhood is a really good prompt to the type of person that you are, and the types of things that you enjoy, and the hobbies that you used to get involved in. The other one is, like, think back through your career history and identify the things or the jobs or the tasks or the projects that you really, really enjoyed. What were you doing? What strengths were you using? What was the interest, in those particular things? And from that, you then start to find a theme. So, for instance, for me, because I had management roles when I was in consulting, I really loved the people development. I loved, like, nurturing and growing my teams and kind of coaching them and things like that, and also my clients. And that's actually what gave me the idea to become a coach.
Really like that, because I think even at the point where people are really frustrated with a career or looking to make a move, that sort of introspection about which parts of the jobs they've liked is really helpful in defining where they need to go. I really like that. I'm writing notes as we talk.
And also, what about the guilt side of it? For mothers who might feel like, oh no, but it sounds so nice to sit down and think about myself, but I can't. I feel that I need to look after my children. Surely it's selfish of me to take time away. How would you go back to them on that point of, what's the good in that time? Like, why should they? How can they rewire their thinking to make that space, or to maybe ruthlessly put themselves first in that way?
Yeah. I mean, the kids are with us only for maybe 18 years, right? And we have still a huge number of years left in our careers once our children leave. So especially for mums, I think, because we sacrifice so much of ourselves for the well-being and development of our children, you've got to think long term. So once these guys move out of home, I am going to be my own person, right? So what am I going to do with my life then? And you need to start thinking now about, I suppose the career and the life that you want to have moving forward, because you don't want to look back on your life when you're retired and think, oh, I had so much ambition, there was so much I could have done with my life, and I didn't do it because I just sacrificed everything for my children.
And also, I always think about the side of it that it's actually a good thing for your kids to see you following your passion, because it's like the person you become, I think the energy you radiate, because so many parents are frustrated. I remember once, I'll never forget this, because my dad, I grew up in a very traditional, old-fashioned, I don't know how to put it, home where, you kind of follow your education, you go to school, you do that. My dad was very much like that, like he grew up in Nigeria, and there's nothing about starting a business for him,
absolutely.
And I remember when because I used to run my own business. I remember when I told my dad years ago, I said, oh, Dad, by the way, start a business. I'm doing a business. He said to me, he said, wow, I wish I could have done that. He said, but I was always afraid. I remember
Wow.
I cried when my dad said that to me.
Yeah.
Because it made me realize that as much as he was an adult, as much as I looked up to him, it was this like strong man. My dad was actually afraid of running his own business. So
Yeah.
I just thought, wow, like what about me then, and my kind of stories for my own children and years to come? If they turn around and say something to me, how can I then go back to them and say, oh, well, it wasn't always easy, but I followed my passion, which is why nowadays I am ruthless about chasing my passion. Like I'm very much about, I just do what I want with my life.
Yeah.
It's random. I mean, I've had the most random things you could ever imagine. I've run a market stall.
Oh, wow.
I enjoy. I'm very much about, because of that story, because I lost my mom when I was young. So I actually have a lot of pain behind me to live my life, and I refuse to let anyone like shape it for me.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? We don't want to have any regrets looking back on our lives. And you said it, Tiffany, the main thing is that we want our children to look at us and say, wow, they really, she really lived her passion. She really went for it, and that builds the courage in them to be able to follow the path that they might want to follow, further down the track. And also we make so many assumptions about, what are other people going to think? What's my mum going to think? What's my dad going to think? Or my friends going to think? In the end, people tend to be supportive, right? We're so influenced by what we think, other people's perceptions of us are going to be. It actually stifles our own kind of creativity and action. But yeah, I found most people were really supportive of me starting my own business. And like you said, people were like, I wish I could do the same.
Yeah, I think as well, people are way less judgmental than you think, and you're also second guessing what they might think. You don't know, that is your projection. It's not necessarily what they actually think. But I love the stuff that you were saying about children and making sure that you're not living with that frustrated ambition. I think as well, it helps them to see you maybe as a whole human rather than just a mother. If they see you as when you see your parents, it's very hard to imagine they ever had a life before you. To an extent, you don't really see them as people, like they didn't really exist until you came along. And I think it helps them to see you as a more rounded human, to see that you have other passions and other things, and you don't just solely exist for them. And then the stuff you said about emptying, when you've got the empty nest, you don't want to have lost yourself completely. You do want to have that sense of self and not have to go through this process of finding yourself again. I feel like it's easier to do it now than at that point in your life.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think also, the point you were saying about being your own person, we're teaching that by being our own people, having our own lives and our own careers, we're teaching them to also respect themselves. Right? Because if they always see their mum sacrificing absolutely everything for everyone all the time, they start to think that's the way they need to be. So by us being, I want to say, a little bit selfish, it's teaching them to also prioritize themselves going forward.
I like that. And I like what you said about social media. Let's talk about social media.
Okay.
Let's open that can of worms, shall we?
Because I just think it's such a, we live in a life now where in our society, everyone's online, we pretty much have a front seat to everyone's success. And, you look on LinkedIn, everyone's doing this, Facebook doing that. I suppose there's two perspectives of it. Number one is how do you kind of focus on yourself enough to have a healthy understanding of yourself and not just trying to be like other people or too busy watching what other people are doing and you don't even get started, right? And secondly, this idea of just not obviously people's successes and how it might influence you and actually make you feel as if maybe you're not good enough and it overwhelms you to even start. So I'd love to know how you use social media in your life to find the space.
I think comparison of yourself to others on social media is like it can be crippling, right? And everybody's life looks so fancy and shiny, and one person, it looks like they're a millionaire, but actually they're not. It's just it's just a story that they've spun, right? So it's not reality is the first thing. But I think social media plays a really important role in all of our careers, because I mean, if you have a personal brand, which is what social media is really all about, you're basically future-proofing your career. More than ever before, I'd say that's really important, because when you're there, instead of sort of, articulating your value proposition one-to-one with people in the office or your clients, in person, you're basically telling the entire world, one-to-many, this is who I am, this is what I do, and positioning yourself as, a person of authority, a thought leader, that sort of thing. And it just catapults your career, right? Because, whether you're in a corporate role or a sort of employed role, or you're a business owner, it is a really smart strategy to have a strong personal brand on social media, especially now. Like, there's so many like layoffs in corporate, who was it the other week? I can't remember, but anyway, Tesla, Microsoft, everybody is basically cutting roles at the moment. You future-proof your career with a personal brand, because you're no longer relying on one employer to know you. You're actually getting your name out there in order to find future roles if you found yourself in a sort of layoff situation.
So it's a useful platform, but you just got to make sure you're using it to your own, almost your own benefit.
Use it to your own benefit, and don't worry about what other people are doing, because the comparison can really throw you off. Just bear in mind, like, what are you trying to achieve? What's important here? You're basically investing in your future by creating a personal brand, and just go for it.
I like what you're saying there about not worrying about what other people are doing on there as well, because you do see a lot of, on LinkedIn, for example, a lot of people whose posts start the same way or all have a similar kind of sound to them. But I think what you're saying there is maintain a bit of authenticity and put yourself out there rather than what you think you should put out there.
Absolutely. The more that you're authentic, the more people will buy into you, right? And there'll be people that don't buy into you. There'll be people like, who really don't like what you have to say and that sort of thing. That's fine. You want to attract people who share your values and kind of share your perspective and your view of life. And it's just freeing to be yourself, trying to have this really professional front and be like everyone else. If you're trying to be all things to all people, you end up being nothing to anyone, right? Because your message won't resonate if it's just very vanilla. But second of all, you just want to feel like you are being yourself. It just feels a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I suppose it's freeing. Yeah.
I'd love to know as well, Deena, how, because I'm thinking, let's say that, because I always find that with passion, because I love, number one, I love your message. I think that passion, paying profit, I just think that's everything. But at the same time, I think, there's a price to pay to find your passion. I always think, like, the price that you've paid to be the incredible woman that you are today is the restructures, the layoffs, the toxic environment, kind of built something in you now that perhaps you got to that point where you want to change your career. You just had to do it, right? Because you didn't allow fear to hold you back.
Yeah.
So you kind of know, like, for other people who might be a little bit afraid, or they might feel like, oh, sunken cost of, I've invested so many years in my career. Is there any small tips or strategies in which to help them overcome that fear, that discomfort, and just really?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has that fear factor. And it's almost like the more senior you are, the more you have to lose, right? Because you've worked so hard to work your way up, blah, blah, blah. I think a good thing to do is to picture yourself when you're sort of 80 or 90 years old, and you're basically looking back on your life, right? What is the story that you want to tell yourself? Like, what's going to make you feel like you lived a really, really fulfilling life, that you can be proud of the person you were, you can be proud of the career, that you had, you can be proud of the mum that you were, right? And I think sometimes sort of that exercise can be quite awakening, because you suddenly think, oh, wow, this is really what I value in life, not, the money or the title or the blah, blah, blah. So I think values is a really, really important one. Like, what is really important to you in life? and are you living those values in your current career? And if you're not, what's going to happen? Are you just going to disengage further down the track? Are you going to burn out? Are you going to have regrets? Like, what's that going to look like for you?
I like what you said about.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I bet that really resonates with you, Tiffany, because Tiffany loves looking at things from a perspective of someone older.
I love a dark kind of theme. It's like
but I mean, it resonates with me as well. I think you've had me, Tiffany has enabled me to reflect like that as well, in terms of looking back with the perspective, looking back at the difficult times that you go through as a parent, and realizing, putting yourself in the shoes of somebody whose kids are all grown up, have moved away from home, and thinking this is like, we're in the good old days, we're in the bit that they're going to reminisce about, and think, oh, wasn't it so amazing when the kids were at home, and probably reflect on the period of growth in their career as a really exciting time as well. But like you say, only if you take the time to have a career that you enjoy and find some purpose in. Otherwise, they're going to kind of look back at that as just totally peripheral. They didn't, and have probably regrets as well, which you really don't want to be ending up with. Yeah,
but fear really drives bad decision making generally, and it just really cripples people. So it's always worth being aware. Actually, it's worth being aware, like, what sits behind that fear. Usually it's really limiting beliefs, like, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not, capable enough, all this kind of thing kind of sits behind that fear a lot of the time.
And how do people cut through that? Is that working on their self-development? Is it just that you have to steel yourself and feel the fear and do it anyway? What are the steps people can take? Because Tiffany and I are fans of feel the fear and do it anyway, and we're also fans of the kind of self-reflection and self-development. But I know that some people find it more difficult, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, as the old cliche goes, like, nothing happens when you're sitting in your comfort zone, right? You don't progress, you don't get very far. So I think, yes, definitely there's an element of, you've just got to push through the fear, and you've just got to do it. And when you start to do it and you see that you're getting results and it's working, then your confidence starts to really build, and then you continue and you take the next step and the next step. So that's kind of one part of it. I think the other part is you need to have a really, really clear vision. So what is it that you're working towards, and why? The Simon Sinek, like, why? If you can answer why something is important to you, and why you're working towards something, and you've got conviction in that why, then it's so much more motivating. And I think a lot of the time that's the problem in our jobs, right? We're not really bought into why we're working towards a specific goal for the business. That doesn't resonate with us.
Yeah, I like I love a lot of what you said about that. It's going back to that, even the deathbed thing. I know it's so dark, but I often find that human beings, we don't appreciate how fleeting life is. We say it, but it's not until something happens. That's okay, I've had enough now. And you often find, which is why people do like what's that list people make maybe towards the end of their life? Isn't that insane that it's only when time is limited you actually go, oh, better start getting together. Until you do, there's no sense of urgency, there's no sense of so I like what you said about sitting and just thinking about you on your deathbed and what would have mattered to you and what would you have wanted your life to become. I also, what about the part about imposter syndrome, though, in terms of maybe how that could play a part in people being afraid of making that transition?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is a funny one, isn't it? Because it can actually be a really good thing, because if you feel like an imposter, generally it's indicative that you really want to do something, but something's holding you back. You don't believe in yourself, right? So it can actually be motivating for people if they channel that imposter syndrome into a more positive kind of thing. So tell themselves, rather than, oh, I'm you know, what am I doing here? I'm never going to be good at this. You know, other people have the entrepreneurship gene, but I don't have it. You know, if you start telling yourself these stories, then you're just going to shrink. If you try and reverse or reframe them and tell yourself, okay, I don't have any entrepreneurs in my family and I don't have that role modeling, but when I was a kid, I had a lemonade stand, right? And I made like £100.
So one of those.
Yeah, you know, and start to find those examples and just build yourself up. But you know what's funny about imposter syndrome? It's actually the most capable people are the ones that feel like imposters.
Wow,
it's really strange. Yeah,
it's something where you just need to sit in it. Yeah. I think sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so we had a guest on the other week called Anouk, and she used the example of if you can't drive, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm not very good at driving. You'd say, I can't drive yet because you haven't taken lessons. Yeah. And that for me was a real moment of like, oh, actually, you can use that perspective on anything that you wanted, that you would like to do. I haven't done it yet. I don't know how to do it yet. And I think that you're talking about reframing, and I feel like that could be quite helpful in terms of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were you going to say, Tiffany?
Oh, we weren't good at podcasting. I was like, oh. But I suppose we had to do it, and we had to do the first one. I remember our first one, Alex, we spoke about this the other day, how we're just like, well, we're going to ask this lady, Sarah.
Yeah, we were so nervous about it as well. And we were nervous about the whole thing of starting a podcast, even though we really wanted to do it. And we did a lot of sort of fake action first of
planning.
What could we talk about? Planning. And that went on for probably a couple of months, whereas we could have just got going. And then we felt like imposters and like, will anyone listen? And we've got people listening. So
it's funny because when I started posting on LinkedIn, I felt like an imposter as well. And I think like loads of people can relate to this, right? You always think like, who's going to listen to me? And, you know, all this kind of thing. And but yeah, you just do it. And after a while, you get so used to it that it doesn't even, it just doesn't faze you.
I mean,
it is amazing. Oh, go ahead, Tiffany. Your turn.
Where does your confidence come from?
I mean, I have my own coach as well. So I think probably that's played a massive role in my career and in building confidence. And I love to build confidence in women because I don't know what it is, but for some reason, and this isn't all women, right? Women second guess themselves more than men do in different situations. And I mean, I don't know what the reason for it is. Maybe society conditions us to kind of be humble and all this type of thing, whatever it is. But it is really important for women to work on their confidence because it's the single most important thing for a successful career and life. Because if you don't believe in yourself, no one is going to believe in you. And that's just the reality of it.
So being from the Northeast, we have a phrase here it's basically called shy Ben's getting out, which is like, it's like if you don't ask, you don't get. And I feel like there is a little bit of an attitude in the Northeast of just ask them, what's the worst that can happen?
Deena, do you know what Burns is? Burns is like a baby, babies, right? Or children.
Children. So shy children get nothing.
Okay.
And that's like a standard local phrase here. So I feel like there is a little bit of you've got to ask, even if you think the answer is going to be no, that you should take. So there's a little bit of like local chip on the shoulder kind of attitude there that I think does inspire a bit of confidence and is something that people reflect back on. But I definitely think you're right about women lacking in confidence and also how important it is to develop that confidence. I think as well that people are often hung up on the fact if they're confident or they're not, rather than seeing it as something that is actually you're perfectly capable of developing that confidence. And actually the things that you're saying about posting on LinkedIn, for example, that now you don't think about it. You develop
Yeah.
that confidence through doing the thing. Even,
Yeah.
you know,
I love
the first few times you're going to feel weird about it. You're going to feel,
Yeah.
like that inward sense of, oh, I feel a bit funny about this. And then you
Yeah.
get to the point that you're at of thinking, actually, I don't even think about it. I just do it. So that putting yourself out there, that feeling the fear and doing it anyway, to me is where you develop the confidence. So
Yeah.
even though it's really hard to do, it's taking that first step, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly right. Yeah. And sometimes you need somebody to push you a little bit, you know, to take that first step and you know, get the support and things like that. And just silence any kind of negative thoughts that you have, like what will people think, and, you know, am I good enough, and all this kind of thing.
I remember reading somewhere said you don't become confident just by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by consistently proving to yourself that you are who you say you are. In other
Yeah.
words, not this idea of even away from the public, you know, kind of people approving you and people seeing what you're doing. It's like, what are you doing when you're by yourself? How are you building these small habits?
Yeah.
But I think also it links to what we said briefly during the intro about what we can learn from male mentors as well.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of women are always searching for that female role model, because we want somebody who kind of, you know, I suppose has a similar kind of lifestyle and has children, and that we can relate to, and that kind of thing. But the reality is that there just aren't that many female role models. I mean, there weren't when I was in consulting and law. You know, it's very, very male dominated kind of industry. So the thing that I always say to people who say, oh, I've got no female role models, I'm not sure if I can make it, and this sort of thing, is actually men are brilliant role models, or mentors and sponsors as well, because they actually bring a different perspective. And I really always encourage women to kind of don't limit yourself, have as broad a variety of sponsors and mentors as you can inside your business, but also outside, you know, the organization. And, you know, just pick and choose, female, male, whoever, but get that diversity of perspective, because it really kind of opens up your mind and helps you see things differently. And actually, I found that a lot of men who have children have been more empathetic to me as a mother than some women have. So
Wow.
there is kind of that as well.
Yeah, I can kind of understand that from the perspective of, sometimes I think another woman with children thinks, well, I'm coping.
Yeah.
I find that easy.
Or maybe
everyone should.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you're never going to find somebody like yourself anyway. So I think we're searching for an unrealistic ideal of a female role model who's exactly like us. You know, nobody is like anybody. So, you know, if you're searching for that, probably not going to find it.
I really like that. I think I always say this. I've only had about a handful of female like managers or like leaders that had a positive experience with. Sadly. And you know, one of the best bosses I ever had in my life was Oliver. It was amazing. It's just an amazing man. And I always think it's a shame sometimes, and I think maybe, like you said, I think this idea of allyship and mentorship, and maybe in a way as well, sometimes, you know, obviously majority of men have a lot of that confidence, so maybe there's something we can also learn from them, and we can use it ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would say the best leader I worked for was a woman, but the worst leader I worked for was also a woman. So, you know, women can actually be really fantastic, or they can be absolutely horrible to each other.
Why is that? Do you ever think about, like, what is it about women? Is it this like scarcity mentality? Is it this like competition? Like, what is it sometimes that just rubs other women off other women in the wrong way?
Yeah, I think sometimes women, so there are women who are like brilliant, right? They're really collaborative. They always open the door for other women. They, you know, they pull them up and all this sort of thing. And then there are some who maybe they view you as a threat, or they think, well, I did it, so you can do it too. And they don't have very much empathy, you know, for your situation. So it's all very individual. That's why I think, you know, just diversify the people and the leaders and the mentors and the sponsors that you have in your career and your life.
And I think as well, the way that men have been sort of socialized in the workplace as well, they do definitely have a different perspective. They, you know, when we're talking about the confidence to apply for a job when they've got 75% of their, or 70% of the skill set, whereas women would wait. And there definitely are things that we can learn from them, like not letting people talk over you, or, you know, holding your space, things like that. We had a bit of that conversation with Amber yesterday. And I've really learned a lot from that kind of conversation, of learning from male mentors as well. And I think you're totally right about that diversity of thought.
Yeah, and they learn from us as well. So you know, I've got a lot of male clients. So coaching typically attracts more women. Because I don't know why, actually. I think women are maybe more invested in their personal development, or, you know, for whatever reason. But over the last couple of years, where sort of mental health issues and things like that have been on the rise, I've found that more men are actually coming forward and seeking coaching around like burnout, career navigation and things like that. And actually they find it really valuable to work with a female coach, because, you know, I think completely differently to them, and I can challenge them in a way that, you know, the people around them may not necessarily do.
And are most of those men parents as well?
Yeah, they are. Quite a few of them are. Yeah.
But I think the face off like men in the workplace is changing. I do think I think it's a lot more empathy now. There's a lot more kind of the macho-ness that maybe people hid behind and they struggled with. Even on LinkedIn, I'm starting to see a lot more men like open up about struggling. So hopefully that shows that men can share, because sadly, even we spoke about this with Amber yesterday, there is a section of men in society that are struggling because there's not much invested in them. So I think we should pull up the women, but we should also look out for the men. And I think that's a good society that we want.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think even like with working dads or dads who've just had children, right? There's so much support around mums in workplaces, you know, if they've taken off a year, you know, maternity or whatever, people tend to put their arms around them a bit more than working dads who've just had a baby and maybe taken a couple of months off paternity leave. So I do think that they sometimes feel a bit neglected.
Yeah, because they'll obviously be sleep deprived as well, and they've just it's just assumed they have to get on and function as normal. And part of that is because they didn't carry the baby. But the other thing I think is, I feel like one of the drivers of the change for men has been COVID, and that like how that's impacted upon their parenting, because I think so many men were at home during the pandemic with children for extended periods of time, that they saw the reality a lot more, and it made them more hands-on. And so now they're back in the workplace, and they're still much more hands-on than they possibly previously were. But they've got to do that coping as well.
Yeah, I think COVID had, you know, that was definitely one of the benefits of COVID, of getting the dads a bit more involved. So my husband's a management consultant. He works ridiculous hours, but before COVID, he was often away, you know, on client site for, you know, long periods of time. And then post-COVID, he's working more at home. And so he's more present. He's more able to do the drop-offs and the pickups and the going to the Christmas play and all this type of thing that he wasn't before. And I really feel like that relationship strengthened the children. Yes. And it's been brilliant for me, because I could do with the help. Yeah,
they had to be some sort of upside of COVID, didn't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk about the profit, because obviously, you know, another aspect of your teaching is the profit.
Yeah.
And I think we spoke to Amber a bit yesterday about how women can What about the women who want to stay in a job, but they just want to add, they want to be more valuable in their work so that they can get paid more? Would you have any advice for women to do that?
So you mean women who want to stay in a job and get paid more, like a pay rise?
How can they increase their value to the employer or increase their value?
When you said profit, I don't know why I suddenly thought of like, is she talking about like Jesus Christ or something?
Do you know,
I mean,
we should call this episode The Priest and the Prophet.
Yeah,
Confuse everyone of like a religious theme.
My accent is like all over the place.
No.
I'm like Nigerian mixed with London mixed with a bit of this northeast. Oh, never mind.
So funny. Yeah. So for those who are, so women are, not all women, but some women can be very bad at asking for more money, right? Whether it's in an employed role and they're trying to kind of negotiate more money or get a promotion, or even as business owners, right? They kind of play their fees down, give things away for free and all this type of thing. No, none of that, right? No. Know what you're worth. Yeah, know what you're worth. Do your research, find out what's your market value, have a very strong value proposition about why, you're very good at what you do and you deserve more money, and then just ask for it. Wow. It's the last part that people don't do. They don't ask. They expect that someone's just going to come and hand them, a pay rise because of their fantastic performance. Nobody does that, right? Like businesses will try and get away with whatever they can by not paying you, what you're worth and what you deserve. So yeah, you just kind of have to back yourself and you have to ask for it. Otherwise, it's not just going to magically kind of appear.
And I see in recruitment all the time. I mean, the amount of time I have a conversation with, typically men, they will say, what the sort of salary you're looking for? Oh, they just say like, I just pick out a number. A lot of times they do like, 150K. And they're just like, and that's it. That's 150K. And I'm like, oh, okay. Women typically they'll say, oh, maybe between 110 to 120, but I'll negotiate the right role. But it all depends on the role. I mean, if it's I can take less, and I'm like, I haven't even said anything. So I'm interested to know, like, do we just need to say the money and go? I'm always thinking, should women say how much they want and go and be quiet?
Yeah, don't justify it. Say your figure, like know what you're prepared to kind of settle for, and then add like 20% on top of that, to make sure that you've got like negotiation, room for negotiation, basically.
I saw someone post about on LinkedIn. She's quite a leader, a senior woman in cybersecurity, how women can negotiate, and I loved it because she actually gave tips. She said, what you said about ask for more than you would accept, so that in case they go down, you can almost seem like, oh yeah, I'll negotiate. And then she said something about tell the recruiter, the person you're working with, that okay, fine. If let's say you start off with 140 and they're trying to go down to 130. You can say, look, if you go back to them and say 125, let them know that I'll accept that 125. Because that sort of statement about go back to them and say this, I'll then accept, actually gives them some sort of appreciation that you have leadership qualities as well, where you've given them the set figure and then said, I will accept that. You don't need to then come back to me and then negotiate again. An interesting use of phrase.
Interesting. Yeah, I think loads of women don't negotiate their salary at all. They kind of just take the first thing that's offered to them because they feel like they need to be grateful that they've even been given a job, right? I think that people who negotiate are actually more respected, and businesses expect you to negotiate.
I think it's this idea of being nice as well. I've seen it, like you feel like people will like you because you're nice, or they might, like if you're really nice and everyone will help you and everyone will be nice to you, but I find it actually sometimes people respect you less when you're really nice.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's probably the barrier of having that difficult conversation. That's what you have to have, a conversation you're uncomfortable with to get to the pay rise, to negotiate. So for some of them, maybe they're just that afraid of having a difficult conversation that they don't want to go there, and they'd rather take less money, even though that conversation is going to last a couple of minutes and then you're on the other side of it. You've got to keep the kind of goal in mind when you're doing that.
Yeah, but I think hiring managers expect that back and forth in negotiation. So I think that it could actually be bad for your career not to negotiate, because you're, like you were saying before, you're setting the tone that you're just a yes person, and you're just going to say yes and be really agreeable to whatever sort of comes your way. And that's not really demonstrating leadership.
Are there, because obviously one thing I like about you, Deena, so I even the way you answered about I can ask for more I can ask for more money, you're like, yes, just ask, like you're just like so convicted about what you're talking about. Where does that come from? I mean, are there any books that you've read and allowed you to see a new way of thinking and looking at your life and your career? Or are there any books you would recommend for women who want to have this kind of work confidence, this thing you have? I can't explain it. It's a thing, right?
I think it is just a thing, honestly. It's not a book or anything like that. It's probably the book of life that I've made up.
Sometimes books that you read like can give you some ideas, or challenge your thinking, or maybe look at work differently, or look at life differently.
Yeah.
Up to you.
Honestly, I would say the most potent thing to do is to not read a book. It's just to get out there and start socializing with diverse people. Like, get yourself out of the echo chamber of whatever employed role you're in, and just start to meet people from other countries, other religions, other walks of life, people who are maybe not in corporate and doing businesses, or vice versa. If you're a business owner, people in corporate, and just, I think that in itself is enough to kind of, shake up your thinking a little bit.
Okay, just live life.
live life, yeah.
Love it. Is there anything else that you would advise our working mothers on this conversation?
I think the main thing is just, if you're an ambitious person and you want to have your own career, like, just think about, what does good look like? So what's going to make you feel like you have a purposeful, meaningful career? And then, know what you value. So what are your values? Know your strengths, know your interests, and then just start to work your way from where you are to where you need to be, and just break it down, right, into small steps. Because, you don't want to look back on your life with any regrets. And mums have so much to bring, to whether it's the corporate world or the business world. They just need to believe in themselves and back themselves to do it.
Love it.
Love it.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you, Deena?
Where can people find me? I'd probably say LinkedIn. So just search Deena Priest. I think I'm probably the only one on there, so you should be able to find me. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
It's been really, really interesting. I've enjoyed it. I've written so many notes. I'm going to employ some of these steps. But thank you for sharing your wisdom with everyone.
No, thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye.